Margaret, Lorcán. Folks, I'd like to thank Lasair Dhearg for organising tonight's event. I think it's hopefully it'll be a good event, and we'll have plenty of discussion. I've nothing prepared in the sense of a script. I thought that, you know, there's people who are more intelligent and more articulate than me who will outline the stats and the details in the document. I've read the document and it's very well written. A lot of it is for people on the left or socialists and Republicans. A lot of it will be very recognisable. I'm just going to give you just some of my personal views regarding the state of play at the minute. Immigration, in my opinion, is being used. Racists are exploiting the issues around immigration, and on a daily basis, as an elected rep, and Sean Harkin's here too, which is good to see. Have had conversations with Sean. There's this fear being put out by people, and it affects a lot of people, but mainly what I've seen is people who would be vulnerable, who would come looking for help, people who are maybe homeless and they're looking for a home, and they would say, it's them immigrants, isn't it? And I'm going, what do you mean? I don't have a house, it's because of the immigrants. And when that happened initially, I would have got angry, I would have got frustrated. But I've learned to say, well, you know, well, tell me how, but they can't tell you how, because I 95% of my work would be to deal with housing, and I would say throughout that process, there's probably not a councillor in Derry District Council that housing isn't the main stay of their day-to-day activities because of the chronic shortage. And you'll get people coming and they'll say, that new housing development down the range, it's only for immigrants, isn't it? And you're going, what do you mean? But they can't answer you. But where they're getting this is through misinformation on the internet. They're being told, you know, and it's very deliberate. And the people who would be most vulnerable are the people who are inclined to pick this up without questioning it. And I think it's up to people to debunk that, you know, because there's 6,000 applicants on the housing list in Derry and Strabane. And that's not 6,000 people. That's 6,000. It could be a single person. It could be a family of 5. So there's a chronic shortage of housing, but it's not because of immigration. It's because of the people in this part, people in all parts of this, the 2 parts of this country. We don't have sovereignty. We're not ruled. We're not making our own decisions. We're ruled by capitalists. One part of the country is ruled from Westminster, 6 counties, and the other part of the country that's very often misnamed the Republic, which is the Free State, there are 26 counties, is run by Europe, run from Europe. They're owned. So they're not making the decisions. So the decisions that we're subject to on this island, whatever part, is being done by people who are controlled by, you know, venture capitalists, people, big corporations, and they're making a complete hash of it. Normal governments aren't known to be listening to the people, but this part of the world, we seem to be making a complete. A lot of us, it's not our fault. We were born into this. Partition was foisted upon us, but we're not making them decisions. But we've always had a problem with housing right back to the whole civil rights era, and that's where the housing executive came. It's the same way employment, and that there's no jobs. These immigrants, this misinformation is designed, and it deals with it in this about multi-aged men, and these people are coming in and they're getting put in the 4-star hotels. That's not true. There's at least 70 or 80 children from this city who are currently staying in hotels. And I've met a lot of the parents, and they're not 4-star hotels, and their lives are an absolute misery because they can't you know, for a young child, you imagine if you don't have your own room, you can't bring your friends round. Most of them, there's not even cooking facilities. But it doesn't stop the fear mongers of putting it out that they come in, they're getting all these benefits, they're stealing our jobs, they're going to steal your women, and it's the same misinformation that goes right back to the fascists like Hitler and that. There's also, you know, there a lot of people, like, as I said, the governments aren't representative of the people. And it's good to see so many young people in here tonight too, because I think that's very important. And there's a young, like, Derry City Staban District Council run a good relations event a couple of months ago. Sean was at it and that. And it was obviously it wasn't run by Republicans, it wasn't Lasair Dhearg, it wasn't Donnelly, it wasn't people before profit. This was an event that they picked maybe 7 or 8 schools, and they picked maybe 7 or 8 children from them. And these were all, I didn't know any of them, but some of them were saying, you know, my granny, you know, so you didn't have any influence on them young people. And they done a wide variety, a poll, and the results of that poll was very heartening. And the point that I'm probably trying to make in a long-winded way is that young people, you know, they know what's going on the ground, and they're more, you know, they're probably more tuned in than people like me. And they were very tolerant of immigration and people of different colour and creed within that. Wasn't a big issue for them. 84, you know, we're told in council that leave the anti-racism stuff, they storm out. And then people like People Before Profit and Progressive Independents are saying storm out is part of the problem. It won't tackle it. It's inherently sectarian. It's complete failure. Anybody listening to the news tonight will just keep lurching from crisis to crisis. Oh, but it's a policing issue. No, it's not. It's not a policing issue because you know, we've seen recent whistleblowers from within the PSNI who were saying that the force is inherently racist, misogynist, sexist. It was a sectarian. 84% of them young people questioned, and this was cross-community, said that they don't think the police are doing a good job, and 84.7% of them says that they don't trust them. But yet the establishment will tell us that we need to leave it to storm out, and we need to leave it to the statutory bodies. I'm saying different. I'm saying it's not up to the establishment. Establishment have created this mess and are responsible. There is issues with immigration. You know, there's going to be issues with immigration because we live in a country, we live in 2 states that you know, there's not the infrastructure that's there, the health service, the housing is being run down, and I see people here who work in the health service. So it's already at that, it's stress and strain. So what the far right are doing, that ideology, is that any illness or any sort of stuff that's going on, they will attach this to immigrants. The other point that I wanted to make too is that there was and it's now known to be a fictitious far right demonstration in Bond Street, which is a unionist area. And there's a myth or a perception that unionism is full of far right and racist. Not, but I was contacted by a unionist elected rep who's connected to the apprentice boys, and he said, look, we don't know. There was to be a counter protest by a Republican organisation. He says, we've checked this out. He says, we've, whatever it is, 13,000 members, and not one of us know where this protest is coming out of. He says, but if there's a counter protest and it's in a loveless area, then of course people's going to come out and go, oh look, they're in our area and that. But so what it turned out to be, or what it seemed to be, is that somebody sitting on a computer, and again in the document it talks about who the trolls are and where this is sort of emanating from. But I've been in that particular experience, the Newgate in the Fountain. I approached them, and they have a bands alliance in there that has some like 700 members, and I'm opposed to unionism. I want to see the end of unionism, and they know that, and I've told them, and I've been on panels. But they says they had 700 members, and none of them knew. I've been in the primary school in the Fountain, and you'll not see a more multicultural school. Schools in the Waterside have, but that doesn't mean to say that there's not people within that community who are racist. There is, we've seen it in Sandy Row, we've seen it that, and people in Sandy Row came out and spoke up against it. But there's another problem, and it's this Herman Kelly's of the world. Most of you will probably be familiar with Herman Kelly. He's one of the far right agitators in the country. I don't know what party he's in. There's a plethora of parties, Irish Freedom Party or something like that. But Herman, there's a school across just maybe 50 yards from here. His father was the principal, and Herman, who's now one of the biggest anti-immigration, his mother was apparently an Australian, but that doesn't matter because she's white. But Herman lived at the bottom of Southway, just on the Lower Road, and Herman would have been at that school and would have lived in just at the age of Brandywell and Creggan during the whole struggle, the whole conflict, the whole war, whatever way you want to put it. And Herman was wrapped up. And in school over here, there was an 11-year-old child shot dead by a British soldier from a distance of several feet. And there would have been a number of IRA volunteers killed yards from Herman's house. And in those days, that Herman or any of his family ever feel that their patriotism needed to resist that occupation. They didn't, and now Herman is the big, I'm the man here. And instead of going up against the occupiers who killed the child, who killed the area volunteers, Herman is now sided with the Nigel Farages of the world, the people who back the people who were occupying here. And that's a worrying development, that these people can sort of get away with that. And I think that Republicans need to reclaim and retake that. There has been in the past, there's been ex-prisoners have signed things, but for me that's a personal, someone call themselves nationalists. I have no truck with nationalism of any. There's narrow-minded nationalism, which Herman and the people. But republicanism, we look back to the Spanish Civil War and the contribution from Republicans who went to fight Franco and that. But I think that mantle needs to be reclaimed, and I think it's the people in this room that need to do that. And it's difficult because there's more and more people buying into this nonsense, but I think it can be very easily debunked. But that's really off the top of my head what I have to say. But if there's any questions following the panel discussion or whatever.
So the plan was for Guy to give us just a on the ground look at what he dealt with, and then pass it to Amy, and she'll try and talk about that or put it more into context through the, I said that with Belfast accent, and put it into context with her speech. So we'll pass it to Amy now.
Hey folks, thank you for coming. I've not mastered speaking off the cuff yet, so apologies. Immigration has been a rising topic throughout political discourse in Ireland and throughout Europe. We've seen the political right use immigration and immigrants as the scapegoats for the impacts of neoliberal policies. This isn't something new. This has always been the tactic used by the ruling capitalist class, typical conquer and divide. I want to be explicit in this. The crisis our island faces is not and never has been the fault of someone seeking asylum, fleeing war, or trying to begin a better life. These crises are the outcome of decades of austerity and neoliberal policies which have successfully aimed to destroy and atomise working class communities. Alongside these policies comes the bogeyman. It was people on welfare, it was travellers, and now it's migrants. So just some myth busting. Before we go any further, I want to do a quick debunking on three main points we often hear. Number one, Ireland is full. Our population has not reached pre-1845 level. We've thousands of ghost estates, particularly in the west of Ireland, and we're not full by any means. That's not even a real concept. Two, unvetted military-aged men, which Gary mentioned. There are plenty of those people in here, but we would otherwise refer to them as people. This was a term invented by the US military in 2003 to make their attack ship gunners feel better when they would accidentally kill civilians. they're not just a civilian, they're a military-aged male. They could have become a terrorist. Number 3, a policy of open borders. I don't know if you've ever seen a map of the island, but we're surrounded by water. And I don't know if there are some of you who've never been on a plane, but most people would agree airport security is a pain in the arse most of the times. I also want to say, we understand this isn't the be-all and end-all of documents in this topic. Like anything, this should be flexible and changed based on the conditions of the time. I'd like to see other organisations and groups take this document and take inspiration from it. We need to be clear what the issues are and who is perpetrating them. It's only then we can properly plan and fight against it. So I'll cover the core policies of this. I'll cover the core areas of this policy. Immigration. Ireland's population has been growing due to immigration, returning Irish citizens, and a net positive ratio of births to deaths. This growing population has naturally had an impact on services such as housing, health and education. That's undeniable. However, it's vital we assess the level of its impact in comparison to government austerity and policies put in place to allow the capitalist system to exploit the people. For example, there are nearly 200,000 homes vacant or derelict. That's enough to solve the housing crisis 15 times over. This point is discussed in more detail in another section of this document. #Ireland is full. Analysis of these social media posts has shown that the majority of those posting the claims actually come from the United States and Britain, with as few as 20% of anti-immigration posts coming from Ireland. In the 26 counties, 15% of the population have been born outside of Ireland. To place this into perspective, there are approximately the same amount of people who are more than 65 years old as there are non-Irish citizens. So the highest years for immigration in the 26 counties. Nevertheless, the highest year for immigration into Ireland was not 2022, 2023 or 2024, it was 2007. That year 151,100 people immigrated to Ireland, including returning Irish citizens, and that's included in all those statistics, returning Irish citizens. In the 12 months to April 2024, there were 149,200 people who immigrated to Ireland. Over 80,000 people left the island in that same time period. Currently, there are more than 1.47 million Irish citizens living abroad, including around 123,000 living in the United States. The 6 counties. In the 6 counties, things are significantly different. The census of 2021 showed that just 6% of the population was born outside of Britain or Ireland, and that almost 97% of people there described their ethnicity as white. The most recent data from NISRA, the statistics agency of the 6 counties, shows that between 2022 and 2023, there was a net migration of just 7,500 people. It is completely disingenuous and damaging to peddle the narrative that Ireland is being invaded or that this is a second plantation. It's complete nonsense. And if you find yourself or someone you know who's following that narrative, please give them the document. Imperialism. Recent years have seen a significant destabilisation of entire regions across the globe. Wars, coup d'etat, counter-revolution, colonialism and occupation, all driven by a Western imperialist backlash against increasing opposition to US hegemony? I don't know. Have resulted in significant numbers of people fleeing for safety, especially from the Middle East and Africa. This has inevitably resulted in an influx of millions of people from countries such as Afghanistan, Syria, Palestine and many others seeking asylum and refuge in neighbouring states and far beyond. The Irish government is a junior partner in NATO warmongering. The actions of Western governments, including both governments on the island of Ireland, are leading to a refugee crisis across the world. Rather than blaming those fleeing war, we must focus our blame and anger on those responsible for the conflicts. For the longest time, the world's imperialist powers have been extracting much of Ireland's wealth and resources, whether that be the British government's actions during the Gordon War, when they allowed more than 1 million people to starve to death because their crops were being sold off for profit, or in the modern day, the wholesale sell-off of Ireland's natural gas resources to multinational corporations. It is an issue we in Ireland know too well. The capitalist class has constantly used it throughout history and is being applied at a growing rate to divide the working class in Ireland. Housing. Housing is the #1 issue for people in every corner of Ireland. The lack of housing, the unsuitable nature of housing that is built, and the detrimental and sometimes fatal impacts it is having in our society. For as long as capitalism has existed in Ireland, so too has the demand for access to fair housing. The housing systems across both failed states on this island are no longer, and arguably never were, about the provision of homes. but about the building of houses as a commodity to create and retain profits. From Dublin being Europe's most expensive city to rent outside of London, with 3,554 homeless children in the 6 counties, Cork's ghost estates and Donegal's make a scandal, inadequate housing is a disease that has been festering for decades throughout our society. Housing demand in the 26 counties is rising significantly, pushing up the cost of rent and mortgages. The shortage of affordable housing has not been caused by an increase in the number of immigrants or refugees, but by decades of government policy to leave the housing supply to private industry and the housing market, rather than take responsibility themselves. There's been a coordinated effort from the political establishment, the vulture funds, and the landlord class to destroy working class communities, a plan that has allowed them to successfully extract wealth from our class into the hands of landlords. Each incoming Taoiseach has promised to solve the housing crisis, promised to build more and deliver more for the people. Yet each time the 26 county government has failed. We have to ask why that is. An easy way of finding out is to follow the money trail. The political establishment works in its own interests, and these are in contradiction to our interests. This becomes all the more clear when we see the latest register of members' interests in Leinster House. Now, this was for the last government, but I'm sure it's not changed much. Almost 80 TDs and senators are landlords or landowners, with some politicians holding substantial property portfolios. Some 48 TDs, around 30%, own rental properties or land, while 29 senators, just under half, also have property and land interests. The biggest landlord in Leinster House is Kerry TD Michael Healy-Rae, who has disclosed he has 18 properties. In the 6 counties, Stormont's register of interests show that at least 15 MLAs, around 1/6 of the Assembly, currently derive rental income from at least 24 properties. However, it's widely believed that for both Leinster House and Stormont, these numbers are understated, and that the true number of landlords and the amount of properties they profit from are hidden behind a legal and financial smokescreen. When you ask why won't either of these chambers pass tenant-friendly legislation, that's your answer. The state is acutely aware that it has necessary resources, funds and infrastructure to build an adequate supply of homes for every family in Ireland. It could take control of the 163,433 dwellings that were land vacant across the state at the time of the 2022 census, or the roughly 22,000 homes lying empty in the 6 counties. To put it simply, this is a political choice. The northern and southern governments choose to do this because it's in their interests. It's the economy. For many people, the issues are well-used tropes that immigrants are taking jobs that should rightfully be going to native people, or that they lack the skills to do anything other than menial tasks and therefore do not contribute to the economy once they arrive here. The facts, however, say otherwise. Key findings from a recent study conducted by the 26 Counties Economic and Social Research Institute find that in most cases the opposite is true. They find that in the 6 and 26 counties, most migrant people are highly skilled and more likely to have a third level qualification than the native born population. Additionally, they find that migrants in both jurisdictions have high employment rates, and a higher proportion of migrants in both jurisdictions work in professional and managerial jobs than non-migrants. This tallies with a report on behalf of the National Economic and Social Council, which concluded that immigration increased economic growth, eased labour market shortages, improved output and reduced earnings and inequality. Research from other European countries shows that as asylum seekers become permanent residents, their contribution to the state outweighs the cost of initially receiving them if they were allowed to work and are supported in finding employment. A US study established in 2018, which collected data from 15 Western European countries between 1985 and 2015, including Ireland, Britain, Italy, France and Germany, showed that the inflow of asylum seekers does not deteriorate the economic performance of host countries. This is because the increase in public spending, which results from supporting asylum seekers, is more than compensated for by an increase in tax revenues, according to the work of French researchers published in the Science Advances journal. The study further showed that over time, asylum seekers significantly increased per capita GDP, reduced underemployment, and improved the balance of public finances. Rather than allowing asylum seekers to contribute in this way, the governments, both north and south, instead forced them to exist on an income barely able to keep them alive. Just want to say, we got some feedback when we launched this in Belfast, and people saying people obviously shouldn't be measured by their ability to work and things like that, and we agree. But part of this document was just addressing lies that are put forth by people. Like, we obviously know GDP is nonsense, but working against their own stats, it doesn't line up. Asylum seekers in the 26 counties are entitled to a weekly allowance of just €38.80 per adult and €29.80 per child. However, this is only available for asylum seekers living in direct provision centres. If this is turned down, this allowance is denied to them and they must find accommodation at their own cost, even though asylum seekers are legally prohibited from working until their claim has been in process for at least 6 months. In the 26 counties, things can be much worse. There's a higher payment, £49.18 per week for each person in a household. However, if meals are provided, which may be the case for a family placed in a bed and breakfast or a hotel, then this payment will drop to just £8.86 per week for each person living in a household. This is less than a minimum wage for a single hour of work. In line with Britain, the 26 counties does not allow asylum seekers to work while their application is ongoing. As of 2023, the average waiting time in the 26 counties was 13 months, with appeals adding around 6 months to this. However, many cases can take much longer. In the 6 counties, the official position of the British Home Office is that most claims will be decided within 6 months. The reality is, though, that on average it will take between 1 and 3 years just to get an initial decision, with some cases taking more than 5 years. Crime. In many so-called developed countries around the world, the link between immigration and crime has become an almost unquestioned truth for many sections of people in our society. Reports show that significant portions of the indigenous populations of what are supposedly the most advanced nations in the world usually held the opinion that increased levels of immigration fueled crime. However, a recent and significant study conducted across 30 member states of the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development found that no statistical evidence exists to relate an increase in the number of immigrants to the rise in any kind of crime. They further added, based on our results, we rejected the hypothesis which believes that the inflow of immigrants boosts the crime rate. This study, which delved into statistics from 1985 to 2018, covered many European states which are members of the OECD, including the 26 county state referred to as Ireland. In short, allegations or concerns about increasing crime or violence as a result of immigration have no basis in reality. People who have immigrated to Ireland are no more or less likely to commit crime than any other group of people in our society. Where individual incidents occur, they should be treated the same way any other crime is. However, there's no evidence whatsoever that immigration and/or immigrants in Ireland have any negative effect on the overall crime rate. When you see crime reported in the media, always ask yourselves who is the audience of this. Ask yourself why brown criminals are often given labels such as grooming gangs when the likes of Jimmy Savile was given a state funeral. As of December 2024, 269 women have been murdered in the Free State since 1996. Since 2020, 25 women were murdered in the north, and that's increased. I'm sure it won't surprise you to hear that the majority of these women were not murdered by a foreign bogeyman, but rather in the majority of cases by men that they knew. We don't need racist right-wing men to protect us. In fact, if anything, they're the people we should be wary of. Subsequently, those unable... Healthcare. Sorry, I'm so passionate there. A frequent accusation levelled by those opposed to immigration in Ireland is that the current level of immigration is putting unsustainable pressure on public services, causing them to buckle and collapse. Public services across Ireland are on their knees. However, it's not because of immigration levels, but rather the fact that budgets are being cut to the bone by business-friendly politicians in both failed states. As part of the capitalist economic system, both governments in Ireland are deliberately underfunding public services. There are multiple reasons for this. To use the example of healthcare, the reduction of access to adequate public healthcare serves the purpose of expanding the private healthcare system. That system is deliberately designed to exploit those existing within the confines of both states, and as such, any changes within that system will not bring to an end all forms of exploitation. Subsequently, those unable to access necessary procedures due to waiting lists or the restriction of certain surgeries are increasingly utilising or considering utilising private medical care, thus reducing the state's need to further fund the public health system. Put simply, if the state has a really good public healthcare system, then there are fewer opportunities to make money out of healthcare. That's an undeniable fact. One private hospital in the 6 counties Kingsbridge has reported a 33% increase of footfall between 2021 and 2022. The hospital's chief executive, Creggan, said there was no longer an elitist aspect to those who came to them. Instead, it was everyone, because they simply can't wait and are seeking other options. As with housing, the provision of public health care is deliberately curtailed in order to create demand within the private healthcare sector. Limited access to services is not because of inward migration, but because of government policy to limit such services through deliberate underfunding. It's worth noting that these same issues are seen across all public services throughout the island. The conclusion, you'll be glad to know. Increased migration into Europe, including the island of Ireland, is a direct result of imperialist wars and the exploitative nature of the capitalist economic system prevalent across the globe. It is not the case that increased immigration is the primary cause of placing strain on the provision of housing or healthcare, but rather that the deliberate state-driven throttling back of provision and the underfunding of resources is creating an artificial resource reduction for the purpose of maximising profits. This especially applies to the respective healthcare and housing systems across Ireland. Concerns about crime rates rising along with increasing migration are unfounded. In fact, all evidence is to the contrary. There are no links between increasing migration and increasing crime. When it comes to housing, direct provision and other forms of state-provided shelter for Irish citizens and non-Irish citizens were all being viciously exploited by the state, the landlord class, and the capitalist economic system. The system is deliberately designed to exploit those existing within the confines of both failed states, and as such, any changes within that system will not bring to an end all forms of exploitation. Only the creation of an Irish Socialist Republic will resolve that exploitation by removing the very system that enforces it. As socialists, we recognise that fascism does not begin with goose step and black shirts, but with the acceptance of intolerance. It is a primary tool of the capitalist class when faced with a crisis. History informs us of this, and the present confirms it. We must validate concerns from communities who have been the victims of government-sanctioned under-resourcing. This rising narrative comes from a small portion of very loud, very annoying people. Speak to your neighbours, organise in your communities before they get the chance, because the majority of people are willing to actually have a conversation. There's no point wasting your time on social media arguing with basic schools. We must strive for class unity, unity between the Irish worker and the migrant worker. We have shared interests and are equally exploited. History proves it is only through unity that we find success for our class. We believe that these issues and more can be solved without delay in an Irish Socialist Republic. However, in advance of the establishment of that republic, Lasair Dhearg supports and calls for the immediate implementation of the following positions. Number 1, a ban on the possession of any form of housing for profit. Number 2, the acquisition by the state of all vacant property across the island, as well as all buildings and infrastructure in private ownership being used for the retention of capital or creating profits. Number 3, a ban on the ownership or exploitation of any natural resources and or infrastructure by privately owned entities. Number 4, the nationalisation of all healthcare facilities, medical infrastructure and materials. Number 5, an end to the imperialist exploitation of other nation states. Number 6, an end to the capitalist exploitation and destruction of our environment in the pursuit of profit. Number 7, an end to imperialist wars across the globe which directly contribute to the rise in migration. Number 8, the funding of public services to levels necessary to meet the needs of the people of Ireland. Number 9, an end to the placement of migrants in communities where it is known that sufficient resources, public services and or infrastructure do not exist to allow the accommodation of such a placement. Number 10, an end to the exploitative and demeaning system of direct provision. And number 11, the eradication of any organisations and or ideologies which seek to ferment division, hatred and unfounded fear around immigration. Thank you.
I'm going to open up for a few questions now. Try and keep the questions brief. For any of the panelists as well, and even Derry. So, any questions, stick your hand up and I'll pick you out. Was it that good? Like there's no questions about it? Sure.
For anybody really, but I don't know if people have already touched on this or not, but there is this idea that's being peddled as well, and some Republicans argue it. Some people that I would say are astute enough Republicans as well, who are kind of going down the line of think this idea that we need to debunk myths, is that a myth? Is that a real thing? Because it has been spoken about by the Lasair Dhearg and stuff, and that's not a belief that I hold, but it is out there in the arenas of republicanism and people who are saying that they are socialists as well and who have migrant policies. Is that a fear that can play in the hands of those who are seeking to cause division? Is it an issue that we can look at debunking as well in terms of capitalism and people who are of this mindset, using migrants and allowing them to come in, they drive down the Liberal and drive up housing prices and stuff, annual housing and stuff still. But in terms of labour itself and that narrative that's out there.
I want to say it's a fair argument. I don't think it is a fair argument. I think it is fair to say that the capitalist class and those that are in control of the economy and our resources, those that are job providers, for want of better words, etc., are always looking at any initiative, any group of people, any resource, anything that can be used to drive down wages, to create a labour market that is more conducive to profits. More recently, the most glaring example of that is inflation. As inflation rises, cost of goods go up, wages aren't rising with them. They don't need immigration to do that. Inflation is the number one tool. And we've seen, again, I can see healthcare workers in here as well. We've seen more recently strike action being taken because of that. And that's not, strike isn't just reserved for the health service. There's other parts of the economy that are looking at taking strike action because wages aren't rising alongside the cost of living. So to summarise that point, the single most utilised tool that the state has to affect the labour market and drive down wages, etc., is inflation. They don't need immigrants to do it. So I think that even when we were discussing and putting this document together, I approached it tentatively. I was worried that there might be arguments that would come forward that, fuck, how do we tackle that one, or that's a good point, hadn't considered that, or whatever. I think all our members toward the end of it had a really good and fair discussion on all the points, and that's what's resulted in this document. But I think there are people out there that see an almost legitimate claim, and it's used in a way to mask actual emotions in the background, that, you know, they wouldn't want to admit they're racist or fascist or along that tendency. People have genuine grievances against the capitalist system, and they're looking around to see what the issues are, and the state and state actors and other people are using immigration deliberately. Amy made the point there, she highlighted a statistic where if you look at hashtags that are included in a lot of the public discourse online and whatever else, one of the main ones being is Ireland is full. That hashtag, when you look statistically at it, 80% of the IP addresses or accounts that are using that hashtag as part of their arguments are outside the state of Ireland, north and south. So the rhetoric that's being talked about is literally being injected into the country, north and south, by those outside of it. And we do know that states and state actors, third parties that are utilised by the state, etc., are using online bot accounts very, very significantly to drive certain discourse and certain conversation online. Looking at that hashtag, I think, taps into that. You can see that that is literally happening. We've seen other states like the US, etc., arguing how Russia and others use their tactics to have an effect on elections and stuff. So the point I'm making is, I think that discourse and those comments, etc., are literally being injected into the country by other state or state actors. The capitalist class, that's who they are, and what it allows, what it does is create a scenario where the issues in society, instead of being directed toward a capitalist system, which is what this document is saying, they're being directed at immigrants. So yes, I think people might have some genuine concerns, but when you scratch below the surface, they're not really concerns. The state has plenty of tools to bring about those conditions. They don't need immigrants to do it. They need immigrants as the scapegoat.
If I'm taking you up correctly, it's well documented in Rosa Luxemburg's writing. That was an argument used like by her comrades at the time when women were entering the workforce, and she had to really actively fight against that narrative. And it's just another example of there's always going to be somebody to blame, but it's just never the actual issue.
No, 100%, and I agree with everything that's been said. And I suppose the point I was trying to make in a roundabout way is that I know we have a hard enough struggle trying to convince people who are being convinced otherwise by people who are essentially republicanism and socialism's enemies, who are clear cut our enemies. But there is, and I have to call a spade, there is an element within republicanism and within republican socialism that aren't the same as what people are saying in this room. I mean, I've seen people online quoting Connolly and quoting Marx and stuff to back up this narrative that immigrants are being used to drive down labour and stuff like that. So although we do have a task at hand trying to convince other people, there is a split within republicanism as well, and we do have a bit of work to do in that regard as well, of trying to convince, I suppose, people we would see as our own people. They want some of these documents as well, and I suppose that's the point I was trying to make, that,
Yeah.
and I know Australia's another great examples of splits and divisions, even recent history. I suppose it's a big task ahead.
They will use it if they need to, but the point that you're making is they don't need to do that because of inflation and other issues. But like there's a debate going on about with Trump or with who he surrounded himself by in the US. Well, do we need to be that hard on immigration because of the capitalist attitude? We get them in and get them they work and make profits on them. So that sort of discussion is happening. Capitalism will do what capitalism needs to do. But it's important. I get your point. I think it's important that we don't create the arguments for capitalism, and that we look at things objectively and try to analyse it. Because if we don't look at it objectively and analyse it, then we have an uphill struggle at times, but it's going to be harder.
Yeah. One thing I think the question's been answered pretty well by the rest of the panelists. But one thing I would just add is an argument like that. What's dangerous about it is it's such a simplistic argument. And a lot of people, there's a logic there behind it, that when they say it, immediately it just sounds, that must be true. And it's arguments like that are often the hardest ones to debunk, because you get people with such a simplistic argument, it just ingrains itself in them. I think the evidence shows that isn't the case, but I'm not sure it's an argument we have addressed in this, and going forward it may be something that needs looked at, because you're right, there is people who claim to be Republicans with those attitudes.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Jim.
In relation to what you said earlier, Gary, about the far-right protest that was organised a few months ago that never actually happened, I see that there's another one online that's being spread around. Do you find that we should be cautious in case we're being enticed into further raising tensions, or should quite a them still be organised if we see things like that pop up online?
I think we do. I think caution is the right word, and I think different scenarios. If there's a protest plant that's in a unionist area, then we need to be careful of the reaction to that, because whilst it turned out that thousands of unionists in this area, nobody knew who was behind it and didn't agree with it, then a good intentioned counter protest could have created a situation that would play in the people's hands. If there's one organised for, say, neutral venues like this one supposed to be in the Guildhall Square, I don't see a problem with a counter protest there. And if the original protest doesn't materialise, then you're there to do it. I think these people can be a bit cute and will try and drag you down a certain road and use the orange and green sort of divide. So I think each one needs to be taken at its sort of on its own merit. I think meetings like this and analysis and documents and education and spreading that is vital and very important. I think the state would have us, as somebody said, they would love to have us on either side of the street shouting and roaring at each other like Celtic and Rangers, like rival football fans, you know. And it's important not to fall into that trap. I think we need to, you know, I think what's happening here tonight is a very important step, I think. And we need to be educating those around us. We need to be calling it out whenever we see it. People will fall into this trap, and they'll not sometimes realise they're repeating what they're hearing on social media or what Trump has put out, and it just gets repeated and then taken as gospel. And I think that's where we need to start. Confront. There's fascists on the street, by all means, yeah, confront them. But let's try and be cute about it and not fall into traps that's going to be set.
This protest has been organised for the 23rd of March. It's been organised by a girl called Ariel. She's a pole dancer from Balmahinch. And she had 16,000 followers on TikTok up until 5 days ago. She now has 20,000 followers. She's gaining a lot of traction. She sounds very credible. She's a serious threat. She's doing this all her own. I came across her about a year and a half ago on TikTok. She was shouting around stories about young girls getting fired at bus stations and by immigrants and stuff. She got a story up today about a young girl, 13-year-old, getting tackled by partly Romanians or something like that there. And she comes across as very credible. She's actually more credible, I think, than people like Derry or Gavin Pepper or people like that. If anybody has seen her on TikTok, she's seriously credible. I think she's a danger. I don't think there's going to be much traction in Derry, but she will be in Belfast. She's going to one in Belfast. I've been fishing about to see if there's any speakers or anything happening here in Derry, and nobody seems to know. All I've been told is concerned parents who are going to be speaking on it. But I think a counter demonstration for this in the Guildhall is a good idea, but I'm not too sure whether they're going to get big numbers here. But there's been a lot of talk on Facebook about it. There was a particular post on Facebook the other night by a young Derry man who came out with a lot of stuff and wrote a whole big thing. A lot of people came up behind and talked to him. These young people are getting influenced by people like her. And it's hard to combat that when they're just seeing the old face crap, fighting against men and knife crime and blah blah blah. But I think there's another thing I wanted to say was about how you're going to combat the money that's coming on here. If you look at Kulak, says no page, well, they're now Kulak calls Stronger Together. From a year and a half ago, their videos have gone from really amateur to really top-notch videos. They're getting money from somewhere. You have people like Niall McConnell down in the country there, getting supported by John Dawson. All his merchandise has been paid for by John Dawson. And how do we combat the money that's coming on these people? And Guy Clay and them guys and Philip Dwyer and all, they're getting money from somewhere.
I don't think anyone in this room can combat them getting money from whoever. But what we can do is combat them by embedding ourselves in communities and not letting them get in. Because most of the time these people don't come from the communities that they tend to represent. So like Creggan, someone would need to go on and influence people in Creggan to get out on the street and be anti-immigrant. But Creggan, a really, really strong community that has a great way of thinking, wouldn't let that happen. I don't think it's happened before, but I think it's for activists and community representatives to combat that on the street, like people like Gary or like Sean or like any other community activists in this room, it's about embedding yourself in that community and putting a stop to it before it even comes. So I don't think there's any way of combating money coming in, be whoever, but what we can do is combat them on the street.
They will try.
No, go
McConnell was in Creggan. A pensioner called me and she had this green, white and orange leaflet, and it was during COVID, and if you need help, turn it this way, and if you don't, and I got the leaflet off her, and it was McConnell. Now, he drove in one day, handed out a couple of bags of onions, gave out a couple of, and away, but that was good enough for a photo shoot. But he'd never be back. The way you defeat that is that you embed yourself in the community, and if there's fears, or do what you can to help that community, and if there is fears about children's safety, you try and help the people. You can't, and the way to defeat or to deal with McConnell is go, show me your friends and I'll tell you what you are. Then you put Dowson up and his nefarious BNP or National Front connections to security service, and you say, well, here you are, here's your patriot, here's who your who's financing your patriot. You have to debunk that, and it wouldn't matter how much money that you would fire at McConnell if he's associated with Dowson and Nick Griffin and people like that. Then they'll struggle, but that doesn't mean to say that they're not going to catch on to that and adapt. You know, you've had what do you call that kickboxer, Conor McGregor. He's now buying vans and sending them to Dublin, and they're putting it round where they're handing out food to people who are struggling. Like, his reputation's not much better. Man that comes out to the Foggy Jew but wears a poppy, attacks pensioners in the bar, the thug, and the whole recent rape scenario. But these people will probably fine tune, because the money's coming from wealthy people who have a very nefarious agenda and ideology. So they will update and try to become more. But it's up to us to point that out at each and every opportunity. You know, McGregor shot himself. Best thing he ever done, in my opinion, was say, when he criticised the other fighter from the 6 counties and says that took that off you from up there. That turned more people against him. He dropped these. The rape thing for a lot of people didn't seem to be. There's no people prepared to say, you know, I'm going to put that aside. So we're dealing with a situation that's constantly moving, but I think, you know, if you have credibility within your community, and if there is issues with, look, there was a documentary on recently about the horrific murders of the 3 children in England, and there was a very in-depth documentary after about the whole thing about you know, protecting their children, and this person tried to get them into the car and this and that, and they delved right into it. I can't mind the name of the documentary, but if you watch that, it'll give you an insight into how these people operate.
Amy?
Yeah, just in terms of like social media, they're like the statistics show like it's blown completely out of proportion. Like its influence, it can have a big influence, absolutely. But this tendency for us to try and focus on combating them through social media just won't work, because social media platforms are literally built to cater to that type of content and to far right content. You could spend an hour sitting on your phone, like replying to some header, or you could spend an hour like actually out engaging with people. Like I'm in Catty, I would door knock for Catty. We could get like a few streets done in an hour, you know, and that's much more effective than trying to combat people through social media platforms that are literally built to help them push their narrative. It just doesn't work. And I know people disagree with me on that, but that's starting.
Just go back to Niall McConnell. He's a fool, but a dangerous fool. He rocked up at Belfast in the early hours of the morning one time as well and done the same thing. He was a bag of spuds. He was standing in a mural and go to more, which shows the intellect, but again, dangerous fool. But there's a far more sinister element in the way that's developing across Ireland. We've seen the National Party have gone through a significant crisis. That crisis, I believe, was as a result of anti-fascist action, which stormed our Ardèche many years ago, and put the facts among the chickens, caused a massive split. Consequently now you have an organisation on the rise called Clan Éireann, which I'm not sure if anybody in the room has heard talk of them. If you follow any of their social media or indeed their closed groups on Telegram, it's all now overtly Hitler, anti-Jew, anti-Semitic content, etc. And I just want to make the point, I think there's something that's not talked about enough. I think a lot of the content on the right, a lot of the rhetoric that's put out there is coming from male insecurity. When you look at young women supposedly being followed or attacked by brown or black people, etc., the claims that are put out there on social media. And more recently we're aware in the likes of Belfast that there are people there who are organising on the right that are not just talking about immigrants, black or brown people, they're talking about attacking gays and members of the LGBT community. So a lot of this for me, and this talk of military age men, and it's all men coming in here, a lot of it for me, my perception is a lot of it's coming from male insecurity, and I think that's something that's talked about more so that we can understand and rectify that. But just going back to the point about how do you tackle that in terms of the funding, I'm not sure there is an answer for that, but just to sort of reiterate what Gary said, like what we can do is debunk a lot of the claims as best as we can, and that's what this document is about. It's not the be all and end all, it doesn't have all the answers. We approach this with the view of immigration is supposedly this big issue in society, and we were like, well, is it? You know, obviously it's on a lot of people's tongues and everything else. So we wanted to look at all those arguments that are made by those on the right, and provide facts around it so that people on the left are better resourced in terms of the arguments that would be made. And so that's why we've broken it down to look at all the different aspects of those arguments. When it talks about immigration levels on their own, or imperialism, or houses, or the health system, or the economy, or crime, we've tried to break it down in that way. We've tried to be as all-encompassing as possible, but also succinct and to the point. And there's a lot of facts and figures in there which I think can make it difficult to disseminate and take in. But I would urge people to read it, and I would also urge people to critique it, so that those arguments can be made better. There was one point of critique given in Belfast around point number 9, the arguments that we were making toward the end, which was an end to the placement of migrants in communities where it is known that sufficient resources, public services and or infrastructure do not exist to allow the accommodation of such a placement. I think that point can be viewed a wee bit negatively, but as we were having discussions around this document and interacting with different people in the community and listening to different arguments, there was one particular thought comes to mind. In Belfast, there is a hotel called Standing Stones, which is just on the outskirts of Belfast. Like, you're in the city where a lot of our members would be from, and it's just on the outskirts, but it's country roads. And there was a particular family along the country roads that noticed that there was young kids, people of colour coming along and going to school in the mornings along country roads with no footpath, 60 men an hour limits, and there was women on their own carrying babies. There was families, people trying to go to work, and they obviously could see how unsafe it was, and started interacting with the people in the hotel and providing high-vis jackets and whatever else to try and make it that wee bit safer for the kids and stuff going to school. There's no buses going where they're coming from to get to work or to get to school. They all had to walk like half a mile to 2 miles, depending on where they were coming from, to get down into the city part where they could get a bus and get to school or get to work or whatever else. That's a prime example of families being placed in communities where the resources don't exist to adequately provide for them. So
That family as well, whenever the media found out and tried to interview them, they went up to the hotel and asked people to take photos, and the mother went and asked the hotel, like, do you mind if they take photos? The hotel said no. She said, right, no worries. And the next day she got an eviction notice and was kicked out with her kids. So this idea that they're living in hotels, that's absolute nonsense. It's more like a prison. On money, we just need to start rinsing Americans or something. It's robbing banks again. Well, not that.
And
No banks to rob anyway. Go on.
yeah, herself, because that family was living in a hotel, they'd have been given £8.80 per person per week, which, I mean, I can go into the shop for bread and milk and a packet of ham, and £8.80's not enough at times, you know. And just as another point I wanted to make before I came here tonight, I was thinking, like, this whole argument of, one, they're here to take our benefits, but also here to take our jobs. I don't understand how those two work together, how you can be taking the jobs and the benefits. And I don't understand how you can be employed or you can be on benefits if you're here illegally. So this whole thing about thousands of illegal immigrants, I would ask you who. Point to an illegal immigrant, tell me who's here illegally. There's another part here in this document where this was another separate point that I wanted to highlight. They're coming here with no passports, they're burning passports, all this type of stuff is another argument that's being made. Nobody knows who these people are, criminals, etc. Anybody who's coming into the state, north or south, goes through a very significant vetting process before they're released on the streets. If they can't identify themselves, or references to their home country can't identify them, criminal records, etc., they're not released onto the streets. And they're held in direct provision centres. Now I'm sure there may be one or two cases or scenarios where the state has made mistakes, as so often is the case, but I'm not letting the state off the hook in any way, shape or form. But those arguments just don't hold up to fact. And so the best thing we can do, going back to the fella's point there, in terms of combating it, is, like Gary says, debunking it. And we really hope that helps.
And you look at the people who's making the comments too, some of the most misogynist, some of them people, you know, in the 26 counties have convictions for beating women up. Where were they when people when churches and our organisations were raping children? They're not activists that's out fighting for anybody's rights. They're not patriots. They weren't fighting for sovereignty. They're not out fighting for the homeless. You know, it's arguments that's used, but sometimes that can be very, very effective.
Look, folks, Sean Hartman from People Before Profit, just want to thank you for putting on the meeting and really welcome the document, looking forward to reading it, and thanks for the great presentations from the front as well. I think this is a big challenge, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. I think that I agree, you know, really everything I've heard tonight from the front. I just, you know, you look at what's happening with Trump. I mean, every problem that we have, he's escalated it in the sense that, like, things are going to get worse, and he's intentionally doing that. But one thing I think is good is that instead of the billionaires being behind the scenes, they're actually running as an administration, and they are to the right of Trump, and they own the social media platforms that we're trying to fight these people on.
Yeah.
And they're using those social media platforms to make huge profits, but also to wind people up. I mean, obviously allow the right to dominate the discussions and intervene in other countries, including in Ireland. So the fact that it's now billionaires doing it, Elon Musk with his fascist salutes, and, you know, and Bannon being very open about it, I think it will be a bit easier for us to say, you know, it's billionaires that are, there's catastrophic government failure when it comes to housing, healthcare, and they want to deflect the problem on the migrants. It's pretty straightforward. Don't blame us, and we are going to basically lift more and more of your wealth and destroy your communities. So I do think that that's an opportunity in terms of, like, winning over people who are trying to figure out what is going on, because people are genuinely very confused, and people's lives are falling apart around us. I mean, everything is getting worse. The housing crisis, Stormont will talk about the housing crisis, but the numbers in Derry are going to go up in terms of the waiting lists. So I think we're kind of fighting them on every front, but I think we have to try and bring it back to the big picture for people, and then I think we have to try to deny them space. So for me, on the 23rd, I mean, I was very cautious about sharing the image and helping them get it out there, but it's out there now because one thing that was good, there was so many people sharing it with disgust that I would say are not in organisations, but who are genuinely kind of like, we need to stop these people. So I just think there won't be a far right rally. We'll deny them the space, and they won't get into the Guildhall if enough of us mobilise. We've done that here before. So I think we have to aim to do that. I think that we need the, housing is a central issue, and the right is using housing to basically say, you're not getting a house because of all these immigrants who don't exist. I do think that we need a housing movement that is on the streets, because I think we've been putting out plenty of arguments about we need more houses, but I think that we can't allow them, I'm talking about the right, to get any issues where they can get their hooks into communities and lead movements. So one example of that, right? See the level of anger around McGee. People want university expansion in Derry, but they also are very worried about being displaced and gentrified, and the university's just encouraging the building of HMOs, and there was definite undercurrents of racism, and unfortunately I think it's pretty widespread with a lot of regular people willing to say pretty racist things, including my mother, and I'm just saying, I think it's that widespread for people that people will pick up on this stuff. How can you not? But if activists hadn't got in there and actually led their grievances, it would have been wide open for somebody to walk in who would have been blaming migrants for the crisis. So I just think that's the, there's no prescription there, but that there's a lot of stuff to do. But I do think that the kind of being in communities, building movements, building campaigns around the things that people care most about is going to be key.
CATU is Ireland's only all-Ireland tenants union. It operates on both jurisdictions. It's not partitionist, and I think people should seriously consider joining, because that's the work we do. Derry's a growing branch, Belfast's a bit bigger. Every week we're out on the streets, we're door knocking, we're talking to people about their issues, and it means for us that when far out spooks come into these areas, they're not going, well, no one else has came to talk to us, and they're coming to talk to us. We've been there, we've spoken to people. It's not just people think it's a renters union, it's community issues, and I think if you're serious about the housing crisis, anyone should seriously consider joining and getting involved.
I think that we need to be mindful of the fact that the people who follow these goons of the far right are not really fascists at all. They don't even understand why they're following, and they're really regular people like ourselves who are misguided and who don't have the politics to identify what's happening to them. And of course those people appeal to the lowest common denominator. So as part of our strategy, it may well be that if there's 20 people out there protesting against migrants, there's a fair chance that 15 of them don't even know what it really means. They're just there on a gut reaction and on an appeal to the lowest common denominator. So something we want to keep in mind, that not all people who are involved, these people are necessarily dangerous fascists. They're not fascists at all. I mean, they wouldn't even know what right wing probably means even at that level. And of course the state and capitalism and imperialism promotes all this stuff, as we know. So we have to go back to where it all originated. Why do we have migrants? As is well laid out in that document there. But it's something that sometimes in the heat of the moment is forgotten about, and it's important.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's the importance of actually getting out and speaking to people in your communities and having conversations. You can quote Connolly all day and write documents all day, but if you're not speaking to normal people who aren't engaged in politics, then it's completely pointless, because you're essentially preaching to the converted.
Yeah, and it's the proof of the pudding's in the eating. The people who are doing the work on the ground, whether it's for housing issues or that, the right aren't doing that. So we make sure that we do enough to deny them that space. Because what I've noticed regards housing, and if somebody popped up the Mara and they were a dab hand of enabling or helping people to get a house, people would flock to them. And I'm saying that myself because I have people come up from new buildings, found in unionist areas, and it doesn't matter about my baggage or the perception. If you can help me get a house, I don't care, I'm going to go. So if they were to move onto that ground, then we have a problem.
Paul?
I just coming on Barry's point there just quickly, just a small point, like I would have found myself, and I think a lot of people would have been, as I say, she became more prevalent, like I'd have been very closed off to people. I went, you're a fucking whatever, you're racist, you're this, you're that, don't want to speak to you.
Been there, done that.
I'm learning from my perspective over the years that that's probably a mistake.
Okay.
I can get to debunk things if we're not willing to have a conversation with people. And there are some people are beyond saving and stuff, but conversation's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, what just you were saying there, and also what Amy, like, about just being on the street, because like, before you were saying about social media, I was like, social media is where people are getting all this information from. You know, we aren't really talking to each other anymore, and then the ones who are maybe like absorbing this, like the frustration is all real, all these real issues. So like when we see things like online, then that like just repeating the same words and stuff like that, no one's really actually having these conversations like this. So I suppose whenever you see things like using that frustration and using just like social media, like, you know, the people that benefiting behind on social media, like unity, like, you know, so that's the thing that they're like driving all this like far right stuff. You know, the Kulak says no, the Ivory Coast fucking flag. But you know, like combining the colonised and the colonizer, you know, like they're somehow convincing people that use of this, like that we have the same problem, and it's migrants. And I suppose that's like just like history of Irish people that were white, you know, so like as soon as like people, I don't know, not as but like there's a history of like when like Irish people immigrated to America, then all of a sudden like they were at the bottom and then they came to the top. So oh sorry, I was like so like riled up and I was like, oh, we're on a complete tangent, but what I was gonna say is, so social media is a thing, that's where we're getting all of our information, misinformation, and then the getting on the street is like that is what we need to do more, because I suppose like we're all used to being like conditioned with like individualism and just like burnout, you know, we just need to take care of ourselves because we're all obviously struggling. But I suppose it's just trying to come up with like how do we like maybe correct the misinformation with the people in our community, you know, like if we were chatting about trying to do something in Guildhall before the 23rd, just to talk, and we were thinking about like, there's obviously groups like Tattoo or Lasair, like people are already doing things, but people see like groups and they reject it because they've already gone, I'm not with them. But the frustrations are the exact same things that, you know, obviously we're talking about. But I'm just wondering if there's like ideas that we can actually do like on the street, like in community, to correct misinformation and deter these things from even happening, maybe? Sorry, I'm gonna sound so boring here, but there's a group in Belfast who are like quite literally paid, their job is to try and find a way to navigate social media where they can get voices over the far right. Doesn't work, hasn't worked for them so far. Other research they did find that most people, and this isn't being condescending, but the majority of people in society are yes people. So one person can tell them one thing and they'll go, oh right, okay. Another person will tell them something completely contradictory and they'll go, oh right, okay, because they want to get on with their lives essentially and be comfortable, which is what everyone wants for their family. Another thing that they found is that, and I'm going to sound so stupid here because this document's myth busting, but we hope it's like a toolkit. They found that this idea of constantly trying to myth bust, all it does is just conflate issues with immigration. So if you hold a talk on immigration to discuss housing, you're just further reaffirming their point that yes, immigration is linked to housing. So I personally think that there should be more, and it's hard now because community spaces are just being decimated, but it's more effective to hold a discussion with your community on housing, or a discussion with your community on like a relevant issue in that community, rather than going, we're going to have a discussion on immigration and why all this actually isn't true. It's far better to just try and address those actual concerns, and it always feels like we're not coming to a resolution, but it is harder because community spaces don't exist, which is why we should be trying to create them. And like Gary's, you're doing amazing work with that, and it's like a great example. We should be trying to reclaim those spaces and just have open and honest conversations, but I think focus around relevant issues rather than immigration.
And like, I don't think, sorry, but I don't think, like, I don't think it's, like, I think sometimes it's easy for us as activists or anti-racists to get bogged down in constantly talking about, like, immigration, how it's linked, how it's not linked to housing, or how it's not linked to, but, like, the common denominator of all them issues is capitalism is always going to be the problem, no matter what. It's imperialism that makes the refugees, and it's capitalism that pits you against the migrant. So it's, I think it's important for people to always look at that issue rather than getting bogged down having arguments. Like, look at the issue on why people are anti-migrant. They're not anti-migrant, they're anti-capitalism. People are run down constantly and always have been, because and then the right rise when it gets really bad and capitalism collapses on itself. So I think it's important to always keep that in mind when we're having these type of conversations, that like you can talk all day about and try and debunk, but the problem is always going to be capitalism. Somebody at the back there.
Can I just say one thing there? Sean, rather than saying, right, immigration is to blame for housing, or it's not to blame for housing, well, who is to blame for the shortage of housing here? So rather than say who's not to blame, and have us see the people who are to blame, the politicians, they're sitting back, and it probably suits them, particularly in the 26 counties and to a degree here, it suits them. They sit back and allow the immigration, the immigrants to be blamed while there's no, they're off the hook. So Sean's idea, and we've discussed this a number of times, about like one of the main things in the civil rights was the lack of housing, and here we are, whatever, half a century, whatever, and we still have the same problem. Bigger problem. And so why not have the march, and when we have the march, forget about the immigration, because that's not the problem, yous are the problem. And I think it suits them sometimes. They sit back and have the far left and the far right screaming across the street, yous are fucking communists, yous are pedophiles, and they're sitting back going, but that's what you get.
Yeah.
Communist scum off our street, pedo scum off our street. The politicians, the landlords in Leinster House and here are never going to fix it, because why would they fix it when they're making money out of it? You know what I mean? So have the march, redirect the spotlight on the user responsible. We're going to have because people in this city march from Springtown Camp to the Guildhall, or it was in London Corporation, because they were responsible for handing out the houses. Let's march, let's have a march, and if half the people who are on the list and their family should be there, put the pressure and attack Stormont, attack the politicians, and be seen to be doing something rather than over here bickering who's right, who's wrong. I think it's a good idea.
Yourself?
I think that argument is good, but I think Republicans and like we like the Socialists, like ourselves and all groups, to be like trying to get behind their personalities, like your man Michael Donnelly and that Herman Carroll's work, and saying their own people, because I know Republican ex-prisoners, and I can't talk to them, some of them are coming to pure nonsense about racism, and saying like you spent X amount of time in jail, and now you're coming out with this shit. But we need to educate them, saying like Jim Dawson's behind this, he's funding this Michael Donnelly boy, and like get posters or leaflet campaigns saying, look, this is a person you're supporting, you're an ex-Republican prisoner, and you're coming out with the same sort of nonsense this band's peddling. And this band said they might be 25 people up there protest. Fuck him, might be fascist, but if you turn around there with ex-Republican prisoner and say, you really want to be associated with that, he's not going to go, and he's more likely to be reading this in depth and saying, well, this is what they're peddling, is nonsense, we need to expose them, because like your man, that National Party, he's running around like a Hull Tara, I think it's Patrick Pearse, dressed up like Patrick Pearse. These are fools, and we need to be saying to the man that you're talking to, or the woman you're talking, that's not the person you want to be following. You want to sort of read more and just be more aware of who these people are. They're trying to be like Yarden Path, and it's not where you want to be going.
100%. I think it's easy for us as Republicans and Republican groupings, they almost just automatically assume that those behind you or those in the group are always going to be in the right way of thinking as you are. I think it's a great point that it's not always going to be that way. It can be very, very easy for someone that you spend your time around in Republican groupings to they just sort of slip into that, because social media is a very, very powerful thing. So it's about looking at ourselves and looking at the communities in which we operate in. I think it's definitely a really, really good point. Any other questions? Oh,
I'll even touch on what Sean said there, even about your mother. You said she came out with the same situation. But I think that's all down to the power of social media, because there's a lot of people from the older generation, with the first thing they'll see online, they won't, but my father's been there, he would get the same thing, he was anyway, the same thing to me, and he still say he would be, but he'll make excuses for those sort of things that are being said online, because he doesn't understand it. He thinks he's seen it from this website, so it must be true. You know what I mean? That's what I think. So it's definitely a very, very powerful thing, and you have to educate your neighbour. And it might not be your neighbour, it might be your mother, your father, your brother, or sister. Just because of what they're seeing online, you know what I mean?
and it relates to the last point. I think it's like, if you're coming from a Republican family, it can be easy for your dad or someone who spent their whole life looking at that. They look at the rhetoric, the peddle now, acting as if they are Republicans. So it's important for us as Republicans, they debunk that. But it's also important for us within them communities to be the actual Republican voice, and not let them and that's get on anywhere near our communities and our families and friends and neighbours. Definitely really important. Any more questions? Jude, and any more after that? And then we'll wrap up after Jude. That's all right.
It's probably not really a question. Well, it is a question, it's not. Probably just like food for thought, leaving here, but you know, it's just on people talking about, you know, us doubting where we stand essentially, and it's why it's important, and it's probably the best place to start. How do we take these discussions and these crowds outside of our comfort zones? How do we get documents like this and discussions like this happening in our schools and our youth clubs and community development settings and union settings? You know, I've been involved in it for years. How do we get outside of, you know, the people here, and as important and as positive as this discussion is, it sounds like we're kind of reaching to the fire, everybody's on the same page here. I would like people to be debating and discussing and thrashing out ideas and having debates, and us maybe being in a room of 50 people and swaying one person. You know, that's the work we need to be looking at and aiming towards. How do we get this talk and discussions in the city centre? How do we get them on the water side? How do we get them on the, you know, predominantly unionist areas in Belfast? Where do we go from here? You know, can we keep having these discussions from Creggan and West Belfast and trying to, you know, make a step in the right direction by swaying people, because it is a hard battle. But we can't just stand on our own doorsteps all the time, you know what I mean?
I was involved in a thing there during the Bloody Sunday weekend where they're doing a racism charter. I'm involved in the Against Racism in the Northwest, and there's a racism charter being set up. It's run by some museum, but there's a lot of other groups involved in it, and there's a lot of Palestinian youth supporters and stuff there, and they're doing up a racism charter. It's going to be put on it's going to be put on the workplaces, schools, that's going to be put on the wall, that we don't tolerate this, we don't tolerate that. It's going to include sexism, homophobia and all the rest. And it's going to be something there's no teeth behind it really, but it's just something that's going to be on the wall to say that this place of employment or this school or this youth club adheres to these principles. So there is work going on there.
I think it's a very good point, Jude. I don't have the answers, but I think we need to go outside our comfort zones. There's no point in having that socialists aren't racist, or socialist Republicans aren't racist, or Republican socialists aren't racist. We need to go beyond. We need to go beyond that. And I mind there was a thing in the Fountain a number of years ago, and it was debunking they had a thing that was debunking that all unionists are on the right, and they had this show where they were unveiling a plaque, the International Brigade in the Loyalist area in Belfast, and that takes us outside our comfort zones. But I think that we will find out, whilst we disagree with the ideology of unionism, there is there is people and individuals within that who would be appalled at racism. Do you know what I mean? And they were saying to me the last time, we're black band members, and I have no love for loudest bands, but they were saying, why would we do that when we have, and the comment was made here earlier about a 12th bonfire and people of colour getting involved in it. We can't keep preaching to the choir. First of all, I think it's important to start at home. If there's misogyny, if your son's growing up as, then we need to talk to you. If your father is coming out with Trump shite, we need to say it. It's very easy to go into that. You fucking, he's there. I'm saying that more easy. I'm sure if your mother was here, Sean, you wouldn't have said it too. But no, I think we need to, particularly our young people and education, but then we need to go way beyond that, folks. We need to go outside our comfort zone. I don't know how we do it. We have workshops, we get as many people in. We need to start working with each other. We can't say, republicanism is so fragmented, and there's a man said that the first question is, what cunt wrote that? That's the first question. You don't read the content, you go, who wrote it? Fuck that. You know, we need to get away from that. Don't shoot the messenger. Read the document and work with each other, because we're all in the same boat. And if that means working with people that you don't agree with their political views, then we still have to work with them. We can't cut our nose off the spite our fists, and it's going to be difficult. How that's going to work, I don't know, but it's good to be in this room tonight having this debate. It's long overdue.
I think it goes back to what Shanna's saying, and creating that sense of community. Like, something I actually fucking detest people saying is, oh, community doesn't exist anymore. Like, community's not this mystical thing, it's something that people create and they have to create. And of course it's been eroded, but we have to start creating the spaces again. I think it's important as well to think about what's going to be productive. Like, it's just not going to be productive, I don't think. Going into a unionist area and going, we're going to have a talk on immigration, everybody come and sit and argue for an hour and not get anything out of it. I think what is productive is going in on issues, other issues relevant in that community that unites us, like housing, that type of thing, and organising around that. It's hard. Another thing I think, anyone involved in activism needs to do is actually get off your phone, and go out into the world. We spend so much time obsessing over things online, and it's just completely destroying. It is a powerful tool, but it's a really bad one too. So just talk to people.
Are there any anti-racism groups in the unionist community?
Well, I think the thing is
The Orange Order, the Black Brown member.
yeah. I think that, I don't know what it's like in Derry, but particularly in Belfast, you kind of said earlier on, when you go into a unionist area, it's far more multicultural than West Belfast, and there is quite a huge portion of people there who do want to engage in different things. If we work with unionist people, maybe not unionist people, but people from Protestant communities in Catu all the time, and they're afraid to speak out in their communities because there is that kind of portion that do instill fear in them. Which is why it maybe is important to provide spaces where those people can go and have those discussions without fear of somebody coming and fucking knocking on their door. It's incredibly difficult, and we don't have all the answers, but things like this really help.
Migrant groups exist as well in what you would call Protestant
yeah.
areas, because that's what they're in. Now FREF, Northwest Migrants Forum, the African Caribbean, they're spread out. With big membership on the other side.
So this is getting wrapped up. Folks, there's a blast at the back of the room with a whole big pile of these. I would urge people to take them with you if the people you think that it would be worth giving to, so that the message that's in it is disseminated and shared, and hopefully it can, like Amy said, we hope that this can be a toolkit for people. And it might not yet have all the answers, but there's plenty in there that we hope can contribute to the discussion in schools and elsewhere, in trade unions and workplaces, etc. So do feel free to take whatever you need from the box at the back of the room. And just sort of as a final point, there's 11 points at the back of this document that we had sort of pulled together that were to rectify. We would view these points as, if enacted, would rectify the issues. That's under a capitalist society, their reforms, they're not going to fix everything. Reform isn't enough. What's needed is a socialist republic. It's not just about geographic sovereignty, it's about economic sovereignty, so that the working class people can democratically bring about change in housing, change in healthcare, change in their workplace and everywhere else. And going back to Gary's point there, you know, that mentality, seen it over decades, and who wrote that, and all of a sudden the message isn't being disseminated or shared. I would just echo that point, that needs to stop, and I'm glad to see that there's people in the room from different organisations, people for profit, Lasair Dhearg, Community Action Tenants Union, 32 County Sovereignty Movement, 1916 Societies, senior finger going up there, by the way. I'm not too sure who else I'm forgetting, the Socialist Republican for Palestine. I'm sure there's plenty more people in this room that I don't know. I would urge people to take a look around them. There's people out there organising, join them. Doesn't matter who it is, if it fits what you think is your worldview, go out, help, you know, put the shoulder to the wheel and create something better. That's the only thing that's going to bring about real change.
Thanks everybody for coming, and I'll them documents will right here.
Well done, folks. Good.